It's it's certainly a turbulent time. The concept of Amalek is something that I think every person now should be familiar with. You know, after 9/11, I'll tell you this, Brother Mahmoud, after 9/11, I got a lot of offers to speak at, churches and synagogues and things like that. People want to know what's going on and what is jihad and things like that. So, we spent a lot of time, a lot of years, just talking about the Islamic tradition and what do these terms mean? Who are the Muslims? What's the Quran? Really basic things. And now I think a lot of people, most people have heard of jihad, even though many people still don't have the correct understanding of exactly what it is, and that probably is intentional on their part a lot of times. But we have to know, terms like cherem. What is cherem? Herem, right? This is a biblical war policy that's found all over the Old Testament. And essentially, cherem is annihilation, it's genocide of a certain targeted group of people. The word cherem is actually related to the word haram in Arabic. And when something is haram, it's sort of set aside, right? It's distinguished somehow. So this is a euphemism. So when cherem is decreed against a certain people in the Hebrew Bible, Hebrew Bible, Tanakh, Old Testament, these are all synonymous. These people are set aside for something. Well, what are they set aside for? Well, they're set aside for absolute annihilation. Okay, so that's a term we need to know. And then Amalek. In the Torah, in the book of Exodus, we're told that when the Israelites were in the wilderness, the first group to attack them was a group called the Amalekites. We don't exactly know, who the authors are referring to, but from then on, the Amalekites are seen as sort of this perennial enemy against the Israelite people. You can say the Jewish people. And so traditional Jewish authorities, they would always try to determine who are they sort of genealogically, right? Who are the Amalekites? And so there's 613 commandments in the Torah, and in the Orthodox tradition, all of these commandments are universal and binding, although they might not be applicable at any given time because some of them are conditioned upon societal circumstances. But the commandment to annihilate Amalek is one of the 613 commandments according to the numbering of Maimonides. So that's a trans-historical commandment. As I said, most classical traditional rabbis, like Maimonides, for example, who has a high position in the Orthodox tradition, his position is that since we can't determine genealogically who these Amalekites are, then this mitzvah, this commandment, simply cannot be applied. So they would go to a more spiritual type of interpretation that, slay the Amalek within. This becomes sort of like this internal struggle or jihadun nafs, if you will. But not all rabbis take that position. The Zionists take this position that Amalek, the identity of Amalek, is not necessarily genealogical, but fluid. It's based upon more of like an attitude of certain people towards the Israelites or the Jews in general. And so Amalek can change over time. And so, the Romans were the Amalek of their day, and, the Nazis were the Amalek of their day. Of course, you have high-ranking Israeli officials referring to the Palestinians as Amalek or the Amalekites. You have them referring to the Iranians as Amalekites. Of course, Netanyahu himself invoked Amalek on two occasions, on October 29th, 2023. Remember what Amalek has done to you, right? A lot of weird practices, mystical practices, black magic practices that are mentioned in the Kabbalah as well. There's a lot of books of magic that Jews in the Orthodox tradition follow as well. There are very disturbing rituals and practices that some of them will engage in. The idea of cherem is not foreign to child sacrifice. I mean, that's essentially what it is. Israel, the current state of Israel, the current ethno-state of Israel, has this option called the Samson option. I don't know if people have heard of this. People have heard of the Hannibal directive, but the Samson option is basically, so Samson, right, in the book of Judges, was an Israelite judge who essentially killed himself. But when he killed himself, he took out a bunch of Philistines. So the Samson option is that if Israel feels that it's about to be annihilated, they can actually drop a nuke and just take out the rest of the world. I mean, talk about a massive suicide bombing, right? And then there's different books written by historians about the concept of cherem. Christian Hofreiter has a book on this, where he basically calls cherem a massive sacrifice, human sacrifice, right? Because men, women, and children, they don't discriminate. And that's how you can have an 83% civilian kill rate. That's Israel's kill rate. And, we're not idiots. I mean, they might think we're idiots, but we're not idiots. I mean, they're targeting civilians. Okay, it's a joke that, they say there's a member of Hamas hiding in the kitchen pantry of every Gazan house. It's just ridiculous. I mean, they just bombed a synagogue in Iran, the Rafiniya synagogue in Tehran. There's 30 synagogues in Tehran, thousands of Jews living in Tehran, and Israel bombed, along with America, a synagogue. So this is evidence that this is not, some sort of precision attack. They're just bombing indiscriminately. They're bombing civilian infrastructure, and that's just terrorism at its worst. I mean, a double tap is no accident, right? So that girls' elementary school in Tehran, or in Iran, I'm not sure what city it was in, but apparently it was across the street from some military installation. And so, we just kind of missed our target. So we hit the school, but then they hit the school again. And the reason they did that is because they killed the children, and then the military personnel, whom they have declared Amalek. I mean, if you support the Iranian government, you've been declared a Melechite. So Israel feels free to kill everyone in your family if you support the Iranian regime. And so they waited for the military personnel, basically the parents of all these little girls, to go to the school, and then they hit it again. That's called a double tap. The second tap is to kill the survivors, and the first tap is to kill and the rescuers. So it's absolute barbarity. Netanyahu, I mean, he's probably not Semitic. He's Polish. His real name is Milakowski. He changed his name to Netanyahu, which means the Lord gives, given by the Lord, right? This type of thing. And he's probably an atheist. So what is he doing in Palestine? What's he doing in the Holy Land? If he's not Semitic, he's not a descendant of Abraham. He's not in the covenant. He doesn't even believe in God. And yet you have these Palestinians who are Semitic, who are in Gaza and the West Bank, and who do believe in God, and they're being murdered with impunity. It's very, very strange. It's very, very strange times. From a Christian perspective, this all comes down to something called dispensationalism. Okay, so Muslims, we have to understand cherem. What is cherem? The concept of cherem in the Bible: annihilation, genocide, mandated by God. It's not. I'm not taking things out of context. I'm not, I'm not ad-libbing certain things. I mean, just read Joshua 6:21, example of cherem: kill all the men, the women, the children, kill the old and the young, kill the animals. This is repeated over and over again. This is how it's detailed. These commandments. But dispensationalism is another one that we have to understand. So basically, this is a type of radical eschatology that many evangelical Christian Zionists have latched onto. And it's basically just a couple of 100 years old. The founder was named John Nelson Darby. So a dispensation means to dispense something, means to deal something out. So this is how God deals with humanity according to Darby. There are two versions of the gospel. Okay, this might get a little bit technical, but I think it's important for me to explain this a little bit so our viewers know what's happening with these Christian Zionists, because Christian Zionism is a big con job. It's a big grift. It's absolutely against the teachings of the New Testament. As many issues as we have as Muslims with the New Testament, like there are things in the New Testament that we would never. The New Testament, apparently, Isa alayhi salam is a divine son of God. One could argue that he's God. I don't think he's God anywhere in the four Gospels. He might be a divine being. He's certainly crucified. We would disagree with those things, right? But the dispensationalists, the Christian Zionists, they absolutely go against the teachings of the New Testament. And so Darby, he said that there's actually two versions of the gospel. A gospel that Jesus was preaching to the Jews before his crucifixion. It's called the gospel of the kingdom. And then a gospel that Jesus revealed to Paul after his resurrection, the gospel of grace. And so the reason why Darby said that is because he couldn't reconcile the statements of Jesus in the New Testament with the statements of Paul. And I actually agree with Darby here that they are irreconcilable. Jesus and Paul are teaching two different things. The answer is not to say there's two versions of the gospel, there's only one gospel. The answer is to go with Jesus and not Paul. So this idea that Jesus is preaching two different versions of the gospel. This is how Darby reconciles contradictions in the New Testament. This gave rise now to something called dual covenant theology. Okay, so dual covenant theology is this idea that the covenant that God made with the Israelites at Sinai, that covenant remains open. Okay, in other words, the Jewish people do not need to even believe in Jesus as the Messiah. Okay, their covenant is valid. So there's two covenants side by side. Okay, so this is totally radical. This is against, Orthodox Christianity. This is against Roman Catholicism. This is against traditional Protestant Christianity, that there's two covenants, two peoples of God. And so that's basically the grift, is that the Jewish people are still chosen by God, irrespective of their rejection of their Messiah. The text actually doesn't say Israel, it says Abraham. Bless those, bless Abraham and I will bless you. Curse Abraham and I will curse you. And then this verse is actually interpreted by Paul in the New Testament. And Paul is supposed to be, according to Christians, he's supposed to be an inspired writer. As much as Paul disagrees with Jesus, I mean, that's an internal problem that Christians have to sort of deal with. Like Darby, he tried to deal with that. But I think Christians need to make a good faith effort to try to understand what Paul is saying. And Paul in the book of Galatians, he makes it very clear that Genesis 12:3 is talking about Jesus, and it's talking about Christians who believe in Jesus. It's not talking about Jews who reject Jesus as their Messiah, and then, have this founded the ethno-state of Israel in 1948, even though the founders were atheists, and they did it upon the blood of the indigenous Palestinians that were in the land. This is just a ridiculous con job in my mind. So people should study that. John Nelson Darby, really important, right? Modern dispensationalism, the Schofield Reference Bible. I mean, this is really what happened, right? And at some point, the Oxford University Press, they published this Bible, and they were giving them out for free. And that Bible really changed an entire generation of Christian preachers, and to this day. And so, and one thing that Darby said, I'll just mention this. One thing that Darby said is that according to his reading of the Bible, Old and New Testament, that there's going to be a restoration of national physical Israel. Okay, the physical ethno-state of Israel will return as a precursor to the kingdom period, which is the millennium, also called the millennium, when Jesus returns and reigns over national Israel for a literal 1,000-year reign. So according to Darby, there's indications in the Bible of Jews coming out of diaspora one more time, and essentially building the temple, the third temple. And that's absolute blasphemy. Basically, what's happening now is that Christian Zionists believe that in order for Jesus to return, okay, there has to be a third temple built on the Temple Mount. in Jerusalem. Okay, and that's because of Darby and dispensationalism. Again, if you read the Bible closely, and this is the position of Christianity for hundreds of years, there's no indication of a third temple anywhere in the Old Testament or the New Testament. Jesus never talked about a third temple. He did prophesize the destruction of the second temple, but there's no third temple. Sometimes Christians will point to 1 Thessalonians, where Paul says that the man of lawlessness, or the son of perdition, which Christians believe to be the Antichrist, will sit in the temple of God. And they say, okay, this is the third temple. Well, if you believe Paul wrote that, First Thessalonians, Second Thessalonians, if you believe that Paul wrote that, he wrote it before the destruction of the second temple, which means the second temple is still standing. So there's no reason to believe that Paul is talking about some future third temple when the second temple is still standing. And then in the book of Revelation, John of Patmos, he has this vision of the New Jerusalem of the future, and he says very explicitly, there was no temple therein. So this whole idea of a third temple, this is a Jewish belief. Okay, it's not a Christian belief. This is a Jewish belief that Christians have been hoodwinked, essentially, into believing. And so they were tricked into believing that the second coming of Jesus is sort of conditioned upon the coming of this third temple. And so they want to hasten, they want to accelerate the building of this third temple in any way that they can. And so these, red heifers, right? These six red cows, they were born in Texas. They were raised by Christian Zionists in Texas. They can't destroy the Al-Aqsa compound. Let's not forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in Surah Al-Isra, he refers to the entire complex as Masjid al-Aqsa, right? Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi layla min al-Masjid al-Haram ila al-Masjid al-Aqsa alladhi barakna hawla. That he carried his servant on a journey by night from the inviolable mosque in Mecca to the farthest mosque, Masjid al-Aqsa. So the buildings that are there now, Masjid Qubbat al-Sakhra, in the middle of the temple complex, and then if you move south, you have the black domed Masjid al-Aqsa. Those buildings obviously weren't there at the time; they were built later. So that entire complex is called Masjid al-Aqsa. So they can never destroy that, but they may destroy the Masjid Qubbat al-Sakhra, which is there right now, and that would be a major provocation. And just really set the world off. I mean, just set the world on fire if they were to do something like that, because that's obviously considered a desecration of the temple complex, or the Masjid al-Aqsa, the Haram al-Sharif, as we see it. And so now you have like rabbis like this guy Mizrahi, who's, I don't know, I think he still has a channel on YouTube. Some of these guys are just, they're so genocidal, but they just, they keep them on these channels. He kind of winked and said, well, who knows, maybe an Iranian rocket, wink, wink, will hit, the Dome of the Rock, and we can build our temple. And this is kind of the MO of Israel anyway, is this idea of the false flag operation. This is something they're known for. So I was a bit, fearful when Israel shut down the three holy sites just a few weeks ago. I mean, if you talk about these things 10 years ago, they would say, "Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist, right? You're wearing a tinfoil hat, you got your head up in the clouds, you're an anti-Semite." I mean, they'll still call you an anti-Semite, even though it's brazen now. I mean, they have the patches. So Greater Israel is what they believe. Zionist Jews and Zionist Christians believe God gave to Abraham. God gave to the Israelites, I should say, in Genesis chapter 15, all the land between the two rivers, which is like, half of Egypt and and the northern part of Saudi Arabia, and all of Sham, all of the Levant, half of Iraq. This is why they're annexing. I mean, Israel, the modern so-called nation state of Israel, has never defined its borders. And Ben Gurion was very clear, the first prime minister of Israel, David Ben Gurion, another atheist. It's not even his real name, right? But he was very clear that, we're going to agree to some partition, but, you should know that we're going to annex the entire country eventually. And so that's what's happening now. Of course, we believe in the appearance of the Mahdi. A lot of Christian Zionists, they mischaracterize our beliefs on purpose. They know better. And Jewish Zionists as well. So they'll say something like, oh, the Mahdi is the Muslim Messiah. No, nobody calls the Mahdi al-Masih. I mean, there's an opinion that the Mahdi is the Masih, right? They're the same person. But Muslims who believe that the Mahdi is separate than the Messiah, they don't conflate the two. That the Messiah, that the Mahdi is a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's not the Messiah. That the Messiah is Isa alayhi salam. So that's something also that a lot of Christians don't know, is that Muslims believe in al-Masih, the Messiah, Mashiach, and the Messiah is Isa alayhi salam, and he's the only Messiah. In the Quran, it's explicit that he's the Messiah, right? So this is one of those things that people don't like to talk about because it's very eye-opening, it's very revelatory. I'm reminded of this podcast when Joe Rogan was talking to Ben Shapiro, who calls himself an Orthodox Jew. He's a modern Orthodox, so he's a Zionist, right? And so he said, "Oh, who was Jesus according to you?" And he was a prophet, right? And then Ben Shapiro says, "No, he was not a prophet. He was just some Jew who tried to overthrow the Romans, and then he was killed for his trouble." So a false, Messiah, an insurrectionist. That's the Jewish opinion about Jesus, and that's as nice as you're going to get an answer with respect to who was Jesus in the Jewish tradition. They call Jesus Yeshu, which stands for Yamach Shmo Vizikro, which means it's an acronym. It sounds like Yeshua, but it's not. It stands for may his name and his mention be erased forever, right? So that's how they talk about Isa alayhi salam. A lot of Christians have no idea. A lot of evangelical Christians, I've talked to many of them in my life. They actually many of them are under the impression that Jews believe in Jesus as the Messiah. The word Antichristos is only mentioned a couple of times in the New Testament, in the book of 1 John. And 1 John describes the Antichrist sort of, we can say, attitude or mentality. And it has a couple of characteristics. One characteristic of the Antichrist, according to 1 John, is that they don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Anyone who doesn't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the New Testament says, this is the Antichrist, right? So that's very interesting because Muslims we believe that Isa alayhi salam is the Messiah. Do we believe he's the Messiah in exactly the same way as Christians? No, we have difference of opinion. And we can talk about those differences and have respectful debate about the metaphysical status of Isa alayhi salam. But at least we agree that he is the Messiah, and we both love him as the Messiah and as a prophet of God, and we honor the mother of Isa alayhi salam. We don't insult her. We believe that she was a truthful, pure woman. There's a surah in the Quran called Surah Maryam that in honor of the mother of Jesus Christ. So Peter Thiel is saying that his technology, whatever it may be, weapons and surveillance, and I don't know what else he's involved in, transhumanism probably, that's what's actually keeping the Antichrist at bay. This is how he's justifying what he's doing. Of course, he's challenged on this. He did a interview with a Catholic podcaster who said, no, it actually seems like you're bringing about the Antichrist, not actually preventing him or staving him off in any way. And he didn't really have a good answer for that. And so, yeah, from our tradition, we believe in the coming of the Masih ad-Dajjal. This is one of the major signs. There's 10 major signs, the coming of the Antichrist. And there's difference of opinion amongst our scholars as to whether the Antichrist actually has a type of supernatural ability given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a fitna. Or is it just, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's just, parlor tricks or technology. I mean, there's traditions that indicate the Antichrist will kill a man and put him back together again. Is that some sort of transhumanist technology? I mean, this is what the elites are trying to do. One of them was asked after his TED talk, "Do you believe in God?" And he said, "Not yet." In other words, they're literally trying to upload their consciousness into clouds and then download them into these robotic avatar bodies so they can just replace over and over again. They can just live forever and become, gods as they see it. And so, it seems like the Antichrist has some pretty incredible access to some pretty incredible technology. And the center of all that, by the way, is Israel. Israel is just leading the world in, AI, in surveillance and weaponry, and in transhumanism. It's just, it's like they're preparing, the land for their so-called king to come. It's really, really interesting what's happening right now with technology, right? And it seems like it's going to come down to a point where very few people even have access to this type of technology. The vast majority of people won't. And so, we have hadith that indicate that he can, issue a command to the sky and it will rain, and issue a command to crops and it'll grow crops. So he has some sort of incredible technology at his fingertips. He has an arm that reaches the bottom of the ocean. And so, people they don't know what to believe anymore. That's the fitna of our age. Muslims in the past, they never had this type of fitna, now we're watching things, somebody will send me a video and the first thing that comes into my mind is this even real? But yeah, you're right. That's the the very thought I had when, they were releasing these videos of Netanyahu, is that, is this even real? I mean, what am I looking at? And the quality of these things is just going to get better and better and much more difficult to detect. And you think about what they can do with their technology in terms of blackmailing people, putting their faces on different bodies and things like that, generating videos out of nothing, and depicting people doing things to blackmail them. So I think, I mean, the tactic, Dajjal, right? Dajjal means deceiver, to deceive. He's the master deceiver. I think there's always been, an element of Ahlul Kitab that practices this type of black magic, right? And believes that, in this case, that all of these non-Jews or these Gentiles are basically here to serve them. I mean, there's discussions about this in the Talmud as well, and other books of traditional Judaism about how Gentiles have only one soul, while Jews have two souls. لَيْسَ عَلَيْنَا فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ سَبِيلٌ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he quotes them, it's not incumbent upon us. We're not going to be held accountable for exploiting these goyim, these Gentiles. And so when we're not seen as fully human, we're just sort of seen as cattle, or just kind of half, this kind of missing link between a cow and a human. It's easier to kill us, essentially. And so if that's what you've been indoctrinated into believing, is that the goyim or the Gentiles are just cattle, they don't have souls, or they're here to serve us, then doing a double tap on a girl's elementary school becomes a little bit easier, I think. And that is a form of child sacrifice, like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others who believe that they need to build a third temple, or they need to get the ball rolling for the third temple in order for their King Messiah to come. And when the Messiah comes, he's basically going to conquer the world. I mean, there's going to be a lot of battles and bloodshed and things like that. But eventually he's going to conquer the world. And the Gentiles will willingly become the servants of all of the Jews in the world. This is what the rabbis talk about. This is in their tradition, that we're all going to sort of willingly become their slaves. And it'll be an honor for us to do that, according to their sources. So this is all about power. This is settler colonial European mindset. This is the sort of secular aspect of Israel married to this radical Jewish eschatology and interpretation of the mitzvot that the majority of traditional Jews did not adhere to. Maimonides yeah, he believed, mitzvah number 528 says that you have to massacre all of the Canaanites, the 7 nations that are between the 2 rivers. You have to, or in the Holy Land. You have to massacre them. But Maimonides' opinion is that since the Canaanites are no longer distinguishable amongst other people, that this commandment is no longer applicable. You just can't fulfill it because the condition is no longer there. But then you have other rabbis like Nachmanides. So Maimonides is the Rambam with a meme at the end. Nachmanides, the Ramban with a noon at the end. He said no. I mean, this is a standing commandment, that everlasting statute amongst the Jews, that they have to constantly go into the Holy Land and cleanse the Holy Land of whoever's there. And so these radical elements right now that are in Netanyahu's ear, that are in charge in positions of power in Israel, this is what they're trying to do. But I think, at least my understanding of the scenarios of the Akhir Zaman is that Isa alayhi salam, he will convert a lot of Jews and Christians to Islam, because he's obviously going to return as a Muslim leader. He's going to follow the Sharia of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and be a Muslim in that regard. He's actually a companion of the Prophet by definition. He's a Sahabi. And so many of them will follow Isa alayhi salam and believe in him as the true Messiah, and reject anything to do with his so-called divine status or vicarious atonement for sin. So that'll happen as well. There's going to be a reconciliation. He's going to provide ample proofs that he's the Messiah, inshallah ta'ala. But yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot of conflict as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention also is that, for hundreds and hundreds of years, almost 2,000 years, all of the Jews basically believed that their diaspora was mandated by God, because there's many passages in the Hebrew Bible, like in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and Deuteronomy chapter 4 and other places, that if you sin, God will cause you to dispossess the Holy Land, right? And so traditional Judaism believed that they were in diaspora because of their sins, and they could not return to the Holy Land until the coming of the Messiah. But with the rise of Jewish Zionism, all of these things were reinterpreted in radical ways. And so what you have now, and there are still some Orthodox anti-Zionist Jews, right, like the Satmar and the Ataie, but they're very much a minority now. But the founder of the Satmar Hasidic or Haredi dynasty, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, he actually said, this was his opinion, he said that the Holocaust was divine punishment for European Jewry adopting Zionism. It's that serious. And he would cite rabbis in the Talmud. Obviously there's many opinions in the Talmud, but he would cite rabbis in the Talmud who would say that, if you try to hasten the coming of the Messiah by setting up any type of Jewish sovereignty, you're going to be hunted in the woods like a deer by God. So Teitelbaum's position is that God used Hitler as his wolf of vengeance, right? This idea of ba'athna alaykum, ulil ba'sin shadid, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Babylonians, that he raised upon you, people of extreme violence. It's this idea that God will punish you with another nation. Ba'athna alaykum ibadan lana ulil ba'sin shadid, servants of ours of extreme violence. That's Teitelbaum's position, that the Holocaust was actually punishment for adopting Zionist principles, because you're breaking, you're violating, you're violating the clear and obvious teachings of the Tanakh. It could be that Iran will become Balkanized, as it were. This is what Israel wants. Israel wants to balkanize Iran, and what that means is, and this is part of something called the Greater Israel Project, or the Yinon Plan, right? You can read about this, the Greater Israel Project. that the goal of Israel is to basically realize greater Israel, and the way of doing that is to sow discord and sectarianism, and basically create all these failed Arab states around them if they can't buy them off, and things like that. Um, and then so they become easier to conquer. So Iran is really the last sort of major power in the region that is putting up a fight, as it were, against Israel. And so they really want to create a failed state in Iran. So what that means is completely just demolish the government of Iran, and have basically, and this is what they've started to do. They're arming the Kurds in Iran, and they agitated a lot of these protests that were happening in Iran, where a lot of people were killed because some of the protesters were armed by Americans. And according to Mike Pompeo, Mossad was on the ground too in Tehran at the time, causing riots and shooting police officers and things like that, causing fitna. So basically, they want to get Persians to be fighting Kurds within Iran, fighting the Turks in Iran, fighting the Baluchis. So there's this ethnic balkanization, and then you also want to get the Shiites to fight the Sunnis. If that should happen, then it just becomes a matter of time before Israel comes in or America comes in, whatever you want to call these two powers, the axis of Epstein. They come in and basically just take over the region, and so the next government, whenever that is in that region in Iran, obviously will be very sympathetic, very Zionist in nature. And so if we were to think about this, how it's going to play out, eventually there's going to be so many Zionists in Iran that when the Antichrist shows up, and the Antichrist actually comes from that region, according to our tradition, he comes from the east, probably from Iran itself, even though he's ethnically Jewish. And so if the Zionist Jews are going to adopt or accept the Dajjal as being the Antichrist, then he really has to be Jewish, because that's a red line for them. I mean, the Messiah has to be Jewish, or else they're not going to accept him as the Messiah. So Allahu Alam, but it seems like it's plausible that's what's going to happen. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in Israel that are openly discussing a nuclear option. If that happens, if Israel drops a nuclear bomb on Iran, it's not going to destroy Iran. I don't think they'll submit to it. And then other countries like Turkey will suddenly say to themselves, "Oh, we need to get ourselves ready as well, because Israel is talking a lot of stuff about us, and that we're next." And so that could precipitate into this, this kind of really hell on earth with people dropping nukes, which obviously, and then the Russians and the Chinese will get involved.